Nothing Personal starts in 30 seconds. It's just business. This is Nothing Personal.
Here you go.
Joint. That's the Nothing Personal word of the day. It is Thursday, August 8th, 2024. Joint, as in, sorry, folks, joint practices. Joint practices in the NFL are a common thing. I want you to think about how interesting this is. It's a scrimmage, maybe. It's in pads, mostly. It's between teams who have been doing nothing but hitting each other after a long off season, wallowing in their futility other than one team. And a lot of skirmishes have been happening. The NFL has been very clear that it is not interested in preseason skirmishes, almost as much as they're not interested in preseason games. So what do? They do what most leagues do when they're trying to change behavior of the players. They send memos. The memo that was sent to the teams said very simply, as we enter into training camp for this coming season, we implore you, we beg you, we ask you, we plead with you, no fighting, no unprofessional conduct at joint practices will ever be tolerated. Of course, when teams get memos, when we used to get memos, Coca, we'd get the memos from MLB and we'd be forced to read them. They'd come in English and Spanish. And so we'd read them aloud and then we'd post them on a board. And it's almost like those help wanted boards or find my dog boards where one memo goes up and then another memo goes over it. And then all of a sudden you've got 50 memos and you can't read any of them. And sometimes they're written on not graffiti style, but with like whatever question mark. So they end up in the circular file, but they have been sent and everybody knows about them unless it's the Astros never being told about sign stealing, but I digress. So then teams in baseball, it's traveling secretaries who make the arrangements with GMs. Sometimes presidents get involved, but mostly traveling secretaries. You get involved in who's going to play some extra spring training games and you figure out your spring training schedule. Sort of a ritual in baseball. In football, it's becoming very vogue to have these joint practices. So the Lions and the Giants said, hey, we've got an idea. Let's get together. We're going to get together and we're not going to really run plays that you'll see during the regular season. It's not going to be very useful at all, but we'll start hitting people. And the fights have just been breaking out left, right, and center. Daniel Jones, the quarterback, worst nightmare of a team, he got involved in one of them, had to be pulled out of the kerfuffle. And the NFL is furious. So they said, we have the best idea. We are going to, this is perfect, Coca. I don't realize, obviously, what a deterrent this is going to be. They fined the Lions and the Giants $200,000 each for multiple fights that broke out at these joint practices this past week. So, of course, I'm picturing the Ford family and the Mara family getting together and saying, 200 grand, are you crazy? Skip the joint practices. Forget about it. I think that we should just prepare for the season and just do it by ourselves. No, that's not what they're saying. Hold on. Let me think of another thing that they're saying when they get it. The Ford family and the Mara family gets the bill for $200,000 and says, that seems like smaller than our game day ops bill when we host meaningless preseason games. Not a terrible deal. 200 grand, Roger? What exactly do you think you are deterring by fining the Lions and the Giants $200,000? I'm not even sure, as president of the team, I'd have to, Coca. I'd have to mention it to the owner, but I don't think the owner would look at me and say, well, you've got to change what you're doing, because if your baseball people are telling me that in order to prepare, they have to do joint practices, then that's the cost of doing business. Now, if you're telling me that we can practice alone, certainly there are times when doing things alone make more sense than doing things with somebody else. But generally, when it comes to an NFL season, I would think that you got to get out there and hit someone who doesn't have your size jersey on it or your color jersey. So there are teams who say, you know what? I'm not interested in the $200,000 fine. I think we're going to do just a practice amongst ourselves. They said that up in Seattle. That is still up from where I am. Yes, if you're looking at me now on the Nothing Personal with David Samson YouTube channel, you're thinking to yourself, he looks pretty strange right now. Well, it is true. It is 5 o'clock in the morning for an unprecedented 4th day in a row. But that's okay. It's perfect for me and almost perfect. No, it's perfect only for me. So the Seattle Seahawks said, we're going to just practice by ourselves. It can be fun with the right environment, the right lighting, the right music. Nope. 5 fights broke out during that practice. Now, that's not a violation of the policy that was sent about unprofessional conduct and fighting at joint practices. I wonder whether the Goodell memo needed to say all fighting at all, because we would never be fined when we had any sort of internal fighting. We never heard from baseball. Now, if you have a brawl on the field in front of people, even if it's 1,000 people, you're going to get in trouble. But if you have a fight at BP when the stadium's closed, never heard from baseball at all. I wonder whether football cares about the fighting that's happening, or if they're going to take 1 minute and realize why this is going on and the fact that this is not going to stop anytime soon. You see, it's all related to the NFL's desire to go to an 18-game season, which you and I know, and so does Dominique Foxworth, who you're going to hear from next week on this show in a very interesting sit-down. Everybody knows we're going to 20 weeks, 18 games. Everybody also knows that it comes at the expense of preseason games, which nobody likes. Therefore, in order to get ready for a regular season where every game counts, and even in an 18-game season, it's still almost 10 baseball games per NFL game. A few under now, but every game matters. You got to be ready for game one. There's going to be joint practices, individual team practices, practices with pads, practices against other teams with pads where you're actually practicing formations and plays, learning how to deal with new rules like the onside kickoff. This is going to be happening more, not less. The best way for the NFL to avoid these fights, it ain't 200 grand. Now, you negotiate with the union and you make any fighting that takes place during a joint practice, the players involved in those fights will be suspended and lose pay for blank days, blank practices. I'm not saying it's a regular season game missed, but you make sure they miss enough time that it hurts them in their preparation for the season. It hurts them in their depth chart on their team. You have to, when you punish somebody, if it's not a deterrent, then what's the purpose? To keep peace? To make sure that people don't view the NFL as anything other than perfect with great people operating on and off the field? Fans aren't stupid. We'll find out what he changes, because with the amount of fighting that's taking place, something's got to give. Because as long as these joints are being used all around the league, there will be some funny business going on and it will be dealt with by Roger Goodell. Speaking of funny business, I want to give a shout out to Pittsburgh. Had such a good time doing Nothing Personal live with David Samson when our tour went to Pittsburgh. I love Pittsburgh. I love their baseball stadium. I love that Mike Tomlin, that they've got the same coach, 3 coaches over the last 200 years. I'm in on all of it. But I'm also in on the fact that I've told you about Mike Tomlin and how he got an extension this offseason, which was totally unexpected and not earned other than by reputation, name, and desire for continuity that is borderline insanity, almost as borderline as my lack of continuity in the manager's seat. Then the Steelers made that trade of the offseason, getting Russell Wilson from the Broncos. Blockbuster trade, bringing in the best quarterback of the league, which you don't rarely get to trade. So that was a miracle they were able to get him. And all of the amazing things that happen when you get traded, like when you're Russell Wilson and the amount of money that Pittsburgh's paid him, a pittance. And then all of a sudden trading for Justin Fields, a competitor. And then Mike Tomlin saying, Russell Wilson's my guy. Of course he is. But then, just yesterday, a weird thing happened when he met the Pittsburgh media because Russell Wilson had some boo-boos. Are you shocked by that? So actually, Mike Tomlin has changed his mind. And he says, when asked about the quarterback competition, or if there is a quarterback competition, he changed his mind and gave a quote, "Very much is a competition." How can that be? There can't be quarterback competition when you have a depth chart that Russell Wilson is your number 1 quarterback, Justin Fields is your number 2 quarterback. Does that make sense? Or is he just trying to make Justin feel, hey, we need you while Russell's hurt, so you got to pretend when you're taking snaps with the A team that you're going to be the starter? Or is it actually going to be a full competition? And if it is, given no injuries, listen, coaches are funny. It doesn't matter what your depth chart says. It doesn't matter what starting lineup you put together, what rotation you think you're going to have. We do this during the off season and we laugh our kishkas off because whatever we decide during the off season never happens come opening day, ever. The lineup that we plan for, the rotation we plan for, the bullpen we plan for. I went 0 for 18 in off-season thought and opening day reality because stuff just happens. Injuries, lack of performance, grumpiness, personal issues, professional issues. Who knows? Stuff just happens, which is why it's always very silly when you are meeting the media to say, and we would talk to our managers and GMs about this, there's no reason to meet the media during spring training and talk about our lineup. For crying out loud, we don't even announce the starting pitcher for opening day until everybody figures out the math. And then we still say, yeah, he's in line is what we say. He's set up to start opening day. But you just never know because every other minute a pitcher could wake up with a sore this or a broken that, and then it changes. So yes, if Russell Wilson is hurt, Justin Fields will be the quarterback and it won't be a competition. If Justin Fields is hurt, Russell Wilson will be the quarterback in week 1 and it won't be a competition. The competition comes when you've got 2 healthy people who truly have not been told or the organization is not willing to say in its own mind what they want. Do you know how many times that has happened? Wait for it. 0. That's the number of times that we'd have 2 starters and we'd say, I wonder who should be opening day. This is before spring training. Let's see what they do during spring training, and then we'll decide. It's a bunch of horse hockey. You think that the Steelers for 1 second are looking at the performance of Russell Wilson and Justin Fields in preseason games saying, oh, did he look good in those joint practices? My God. People are funny. That 80-yard pass he threw during the scrimmage, that was a Gordon Ramsay chef's kiss. Russell Wilson is barely being paid by the Steelers. Don't give me that as your argument. He was brought in as a huge trade acquisition, regardless of what he's being paid. Justin Fields was brought in to be a quality backup, given the possibility that Russell Wilson is hurt or stinks. They wanted depth at their quarterback position. That doesn't mean competition. Depth is not a synonym to competition. So Mike Tomlin is going to continue to tell you this, and it's going to continue to make no sense to me. He said, what happens in stadium is weighted heavier than what happens in practice. What he means is, if one of the guys cannot play, that matters. So what he could have said is his quote, I remember Coca's yelling in my ear at 5:15 Pacific time, 8:15 Eastern, or it's 10:15 if you're watching on the DraftKings network. I remember the Broncos are paying his salary and that the Pittsburgh Steelers are paying the veteran minimum to get him. Unreal. Now, what was I saying? Oh, of course, what matters in the stadium is weighed heavier than what happens in practice. But what he should have just said is, we're going to see where we are right before week one. And whichever of these two guys is standing, that's who we're going to go with. Mike, we're on to you, my man. Good luck, Russ. It's going to go great. All right, Coca, play some music for me, please.
You know what I want? I want to talk to Samson.
So you want to talk to Samson. That's when you get into my X. It still sounds weird. 4869. That's when you get into my Twitter at David P. Samson. DMs are open. Ask me a question. I try to answer as many as I can. I have a website that we built, davidsamsonpodcast.com. Please feel free to go to that website and go in and ask questions and look at the merchandise and enjoy horse hockey merchandise and regular diamond logo merchandise, the kind of which I'm wearing right now on the Nothing Personal with David Samson YouTube channel. Hello, David. Thank you. That's a great way to start a question. Do you have an updated opinion of the Harbaugh situation, given what was announced today by the NCAA? Boy, you're my kind of person. So that means you listened to yesterday's show. Yesterday's show is when I talked on August 7th, 2024, about Jim Harbaugh and some of the interesting, funny comments that were made by Harbaugh when he told you that he doesn't lie, doesn't cheat, doesn't do anything, and he has nothing to apologize for. Well, what are you thinking today, Jimmy? Because guess what happened after that entire diatribe that Shakespeare wrote about protesting too much? The NCAA announced a 4-year show cause order for Jim Harbaugh. Why? For impermissible contact with recruits and players while access was restricted during COVID. Basically banning him from college athletics until August 2028. I'm trying to think whether Jim, any idea this was coming, and thus chose to be the coach of the Chargers in the NFL. Probably not. Probably just a total coincidence because he has nothing to apologize for. He didn't do anything wrong. So why would he think that he even have a problem at all with any of the investigations that were going on, which, by the way, the sign stealing one for Connor Stallions, as we discussed yesterday, is still open. But I don't want to assume the worst. That's a terrible way to be on a Thursday. So instead, I'm going to tell you that the perfect situation came along for Jim Harbaugh. He saw the Chargers opening, and it's the only coaching position he's wanted since he started in Michigan. He looked at LA and said, I love you, Randy Newman, and I'm going. Now, if I can get 60, 70, 80 million, I'm in. And if I can only get 5 or 10 million, I'm in. The panel, this is the NCAA panel, they noted that Harbaugh's intentional disregard for NCAA legislation and unethical conduct amplified the severity of the case. The panel had this case as a level 1 aggravated. That's how you get to a 4-year show cause. Inside that show cause would be a 1-season suspension for Harbaugh. Remember Harbaugh last year? Coca, was it 2 years ago when he purposely self-imposed a 3-game deadline against 3 scrubs? Horace Mann, Riverdale, and Dalton were the 3 teams that he didn't coach Michigan against. And I wasn't really worked up at all until his lawyer released a quote. He has a lawyer named Tom Bruno Mars, and here's what the lawyer said. Blasting the NCAA. Spoiler alert. The way I see it from Coach Harbaugh's perspective, today's decision is like being in college and getting a letter from your high school saying you've been suspended because you didn't sign your yearbook. What an insult. We'll get back to that. If I were in Coach Harbaugh's shoes and had an $80 million contract as head coach of the Chargers, I wouldn't pay any attention to the findings of a kangaroo court, which claims to represent the principles of the nation's most flagrant, repeat violator of the federal antitrust laws. I'm insulted. I'm a lawyer myself. Not practicing. I've gotten it right. Don't need any more practice. No, I'm kidding. We all need more practice. Let's just break that down so I can let my heart rate get back down into the 50s where I want it. He's saying that Jim Harbaugh, who's reckless indifference toward authority, reckless indifference to following any regulations, reckless indifference to doing anything other than making sure Michigan wins a national championship through lying, cheating, and stealing. What the lawyer is saying is, listen, just know that anything he did doesn't matter because he did it so long ago. He's not in high school anymore, meaning college. He's now in college, meaning the pros. And really all he did was not sign his yearbook. I'm trying to think what the equivalent is of what the equivalent violation is of not signing the yearbook. Maybe not getting action at the 5-year reunion from the person whose yearbook you didn't sign. That may be one. Hold on, let me think of another one of not signing someone's yearbook. Oh, yeah. Nothing. It's like a joke. It is the most insulting analogy I've ever heard. Here's what the analogy is. It's like moving to another country when your name is Roman Polanski and saying, oh, I'm not coming back because if I do, I may get in trouble. So therefore, I'm going to have people come to me to make movies and I'm going to be just fine. Now, don't you think that I am in any way saying that what Jim Harbaugh did involved anything that has to do with underage kids? But understand that it is a lot closer to more serious than saying I didn't sign my high school yearbook and now I'm in college. It's a big middle finger right up the nose of the NCAA. And in fact, Michigan itself, the current University of Michigan athletic director, has said the school has already accepted these sanctions. They've served the penalties and said, our staff has worked to improve processes and we are focused on the future and our commitment to integrity and compliance. Do you know who says a quote like that? Someone who knows that prior to that statement, their processes were bad. They were focused solely on the present and winning, and they had no commitment to integrity or compliance. So before you make a judgment for yourself and all of the Michigan alums, and my good friend Rich Eisen gets too angry with me, I want to remind you of what Harbaugh's statement was yesterday. Never lie, never cheat, never steal. I was raised with that lesson. I've raised my family on that lesson. I've preached that lesson to the teams I've coached. No one's perfect. If you stumble, You apologize and make it right. And today I do not apologize. Do you for 1 minute believe that Jim Harbaugh didn't know what was going on? Because guess what? How do you get 80 million from a team unless it's a team of morons? How do you get 80 million from a team if you're not a good coach? And do you know one of the things you need to be as a good coach? You need to know how to manipulate the media. You need to know how to be a leader of men, but to understand what it means to be a leader of men. And you need to be able to work around all sorts of things. Yes, I'm saying the quiet part out loud. As a matter of fact, it's not that quiet. The loud part out loud are the departments within every NFL organization, every NBA organization, who are meant solely to skirt the rules that exist. Whether it's salary cap rules, whether it's signing rules, whatever rules there are, we're going to hire people like tax lawyers are hired to avoid the IRS code. We're going to hire people and figure out what we can do to go right to the line and not get caught. But hey, if we get caught, the deterrent, it's not so bad. Jim Harbaugh says, keep going, guys, because I can always get 80 million from an NFL team. Got me too worked up, Coca. This story's not over. It's not. Jim Harbaugh's got to answer to this stuff. He's got to answer to it. And if he doesn't succeed with the Chargers and gets canned, which all coaches are hired to be fired, all of them. So if it doesn't work, I guess college is not going to be an option unless there's some sort of settlement or unless he just agrees to sit out and they plan a whole year of schedules against the elite high school prep schools in the country. All right, let's take a break, Coca. When we come back, it is a Thursday. We get to review my top 100 movies that's found on davidsamsonpodcast.com. And then we're going to go over some picks and wait till I talk to you about what happened in Vienna. I'm sorry in advance. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Nothing Personal. My name is David Samson. We are coming at you live at 8 a.m. Eastern, 10 a.m. on the DraftKings Network. If you're watching us, you could be watching us live on Nothing Personal with David Samson YouTube channel. If you're listening, then thank you. Please download, subscribe, share, and enjoy. I will again tell you at the end of the show, which isn't coming for 23 minutes, but tomorrow is a mailbag episode that I think you will enjoy. And next week, we have 4 sit-downs and a mailbag episode. The sit-downs are really cool. We sit down with a big-time agent named Jeff Berry. You're going to hear a conversation with the aforementioned Rich Eisen, Dominique Foxworth, Pablo Torre, and another mailbag episode. It is not often we don't do live shows every day. Next week, they are shows that are not live, but you're going to love them. I promise. 4 sit-downs, 2 mailbags coming up. Don't worry. I'll still be watching movies and I'll still be engaging with you on all of the ways that you reach me. I'm not disappearing. I don't think. When one of the listeners came up with this idea, it was immediately implemented, which was, why don't you review every movie in your top 100? And that was brilliant because that meant I would get to see them all again. And we do it in a random order. And we're going to do it over the course of 100 Thursdays of shows. Today's top 100 movie is Minority Report. We choose next week's, which won't be next week's. It'll be for the week after. We choose it after the review. Wait till you see the spreadsheet that we have that was done by one of our listeners. It's amazing. Minority Report, as you know, Steven Spielberg, Tom Cruise. I'm going to say, this is hyperbole. Let me get to the review. Go watch Minority Report. I don't care how old you are. If you've seen it once, see it again. If you've seen it 0 times, see it once. If you've seen it 5 times, watch it 6 times. The movie is aged perfectly. It is fascinating. The thought of a world being like that and the way it makes you think about what pre-crime is. Could you or would you stop a crime if you knew it were going to be committed? And if you stopped it, is the person guilty before actually committing the crime? Is there free will, or are we destined? Is there such thing as a crime of passion? And it's basically, very simply, the difference between premeditated and not. And the query is everything premeditated? The only difference is it a quarter of a second or is it a year? The thing about Minority Report, the little things that don't get a lot of attention, the way they travel from place to place, the way the cars look, the way the highways look, the way, and I talk about this anytime I go into a store, I'm looking around for an eye reader because I want to find cargo shorts, waist 29. I'm hoping that when they look at my eyes, they say, oh, look, aisle 4, you haven't bought cargo shorts in 6 weeks. Here they are in your color. I just went into a store recently because I had to replace a jacket that I've worn for a decade. And it would have been great because I didn't remember the name of the jacket in the store, and I had to fumble around looking for it. This just happened yesterday, Coca. What a coincidence. So, you know how jackets have names, whatever? It turned out to be maybe a puff coat or something. And it was on sale for 70% off because it was discontinued and seasons old. It was perfect because I still love it. I think I'm of that age where my clothing taste has frozen. My level of hipness has maxed out. But anyway, I wasted like 4 minutes of my life yesterday when if I'd walked into the store and had my eyes read and they knew exactly what I wanted, boom, there would have been a new puffer coat waiting for me. Minority Report, go watch it immediately. I love it. Number 51 on the list. It's funny, when we're done with this process, I'm going to relook at my top 100. I don't know that Minority Report will move up because there's so many movies that I just have in my top 100, like 100. But that shows you where I think of it. All right, what's next? Bring up that document. Here it is. All of the yellows, Coca, are things we've done, and the greens are numbers that we have yet to do. And then Coca hits a button, and then boom, we have a movie randomly. Oh, thank you, Coca. Chasing Amy. How many of you have heard? For a long time, Nothing Personal fans, you've heard me use that expression a lot. I've spent my life chasing Amy, not just since 2003. We will give you the information on our next Thursday live regular show, which will be 2 weeks from today. Nothing Personal Pick of the Day, presented by DraftKings. Stay tuned because you'll hear more about DraftKings and all it has to offer throughout the show. DraftKings, the crown is yours. We've got a big American League East series happening between the Orioles and the Blue Jays. The Baltimore Orioles and the New York Yankees are currently tied for first. They're also tied as the number one wild card, 4.5 games ahead. The loser of the Orioles-Yankees for the rest of the season, and we are heading into the stretch, will be forced to play a wild card series. The winner will have time off, which some teams don't want. Is it a fight to the finish, or is it a fight to not wanting to win? Very interesting strategic discussions are taking place right now in the front offices of the Orioles and the Yankees, but where we stand is they're tied. About 21 years ago, Matt Holliday, great player who many of you may have watched, had a child. His child's name was Jackson. Well, Jackson Holliday is now a 21-year-old professional baseball player. He had a bit of a tough start to his career, but boy, has he been raking since he was recalled. He is the youngest player in the history of the American League to homer in 3 straight games. The player who I thought would not play hard, would be hurt nonstop. It turns out he just wanted to get out of the South Side, at least for this small little segment. He's 8 for his last 15 with 2 doubles and 4 ribbies in his past 4 games. We're talking about Eloy Jimenez, the trade that I said wouldn't work. Maybe it won't at the end of the day, but right now it's working. Side note, Coca, and then we'll get to the pick. I don't like getting criticized over being wrong about a player when the sample size is small, because I will never take credit when I say something about a player or a trade when the sample size is small. And you know me. When I'm wrong, I tell you I'm wrong, with wait to sees, with corrections, with anything. But someone contacted me yesterday and said, look, mate, you must be a Chicagoan, and said, look, Jimenez is a all-star player. Look what he's doing. Well, yes, he's 8 for his last 15. It's been great, but it's a little early, don't you think? So the Orioles are playing the Blue Jays. The Blue Jays, disappointing, problematic team, where right now what the president is talking about is whether or not the GM is going to stay or not stay, and is standing by his man. I like that when you take the microphone. Stand by your man. Our team stinks. What are we going to do? The owner wants changes, and I know that it'll be me if the changes happen, so I've got to say my GM's great. A lot of that stuff happens. Nothing personal pick of the day presented by DraftKings. Stay tuned because you'll hear more about DraftKings and all it has to offer throughout the show. DraftKings, the crown is yours. Today's pick is the Orioles minus 115 over Kevin Gausman and the Toronto Blue Jays. Thank you. Next, how did we do yesterday? Ooh, we came so close to a sweep. We had Blake Snell going over 6 1/3 innings. All he had to do was get one more out. He had to come out in the 7th inning, and we would have won that. And that was a plus 145. Lost it. We had Blake Snell plus 130 over 7.5 Ks. Guess what? He had 8 Ks. He had 8 Ks in 6 innings. Quality start, sort of. Too many pitches, only 93. I thought he was going to come out, but because he had 114 the previous 5 days, I guess they said we got to protect our great investment of our player who's going to opt out and leave us, so we can't put him out in the 7th inning. Bunch of horse hockey. So we're still 105 and 111, 6 games under. That was fun. I love what MLB announced yesterday, Coca. This is, the games at Rickwood that they did last year and the games at Fort Bragg and the Little League games, and they find amazing events and they make these stadiums baseball ready. Well, baseball announced something, according to The Athletic, and I want to sort of bring you behind the scenes. It's got to be 10 years ago. I'd have to go back with Coca to remind me what year the Marlins played in Fort Bragg. That was the first time MLB did a game like this. And I'm blanking right now who we even played and what year it was, but I was there and it was amazing. They built a stadium and refurbished it in Fort Bragg, and it was a major league stadium for a day. It was 2016 against the Braves. It's funny how my brain works because it was only 2 months later that my entire baseball career and world basically shattered. God, I remember Fort Bragg. Let's not even go down memory lane, but everything was so good at Fort Bragg. Anyway, if it weren't for that, I don't know that I'd even be sitting here with you guys today. So we had a list within baseball and on the competition committee, and the list was of ideas. And I don't recall the historic Bristol Motor Speedway being on the list, but I do know that with Tony Petitti and Rob Manford and Dan Hallam and a bunch of us were sitting around making lists. The point was, we're going to have to keep doing this. We're going to have to find different places to do these one-off games. Why? Because the broadcasters like them. Because unlike an ordinary regular season game, the ratings uptick for these interesting games. And if we could do good for somebody, that would be amazing, like Rickwood, bringing all the Negro League players back, having little leaguers watch at the Little League or members of the armed forces watch at Fort Bragg. If we can do that, let's do that. But much like our concern of Pablo Torre not being able to find out stuff for the rest of time, there is going to come a moment when you can't find the good, so you just have to find the cool. What's cool about the historic Bristol Motor Speedway? They'll find some tie-in to something culturally important. But what's cool is that it could break MLB's single game attendance record. That record was 115,300. It was for a preseason game back in 2008. This track fits about 150 grand. They played a football game there once, and 157,000 people showed up. Do you think it's a coincidence that this year it was decided that they were going to play at Bristol Motor Speedway next year, try to draw 115,300 plus, because the PR announcement, number one, largest attended regular season game ever. Wait for it. As a matter of fact, Coca, wait to see when we tell you something's going to happen. When it doesn't, we'll revisit it. When it does, we'll revisit it. Please make this my official wait to see from August 8th, 2024. I guarantee this one. The game at historic Bristol Motor Speedway next season between the Braves and the Reds will be the highest attended regular season baseball game in history. Wink, wink. It's also going to be the highest game ever because it's going to get more than 115,300. Wait to see. It will be the highest attended Major League Baseball game in history. What a great announcement. It also gets to count. Now, here's something that I thought of. I was always very focused on our home attendance, which is why I would make it up, because I didn't want to ever have a game below 10,000 people. I never wanted to finish in last place in the league. So if possible, you make up some attendance and you all of a sudden have a larger average attendance, and therefore in the listings that are always publicized and in the box score where they only give you sold, not turnstile, it leaves plenty of room for chicanery. Can you imagine? Is it a Braves home game or a Reds home game? If it's a Reds home game, do the Reds get credit for all 120,000 people? And if so, how much does that change their average attendance? I know what I'd be fighting for. Okay. I would like to make an announcement that one of the things that happened yesterday was quite troubling and made me furious. 3 Taylor Swift shows were canceled in Vienna. It does not mean that I was planning to go. I wasn't, though I know people who were. It does not mean that I've gone to a Taylor Swift concert, which I haven't. It means that there are people, whether they are from Vienna or from any place in Europe or from any place around the world, who flew there to see shows, who spent money there to see shows, were not able to see shows. I have been a part and had shows canceled that I've had tickets for. Health, the singer gets sick. COVID, the singer loses his voice. Personal emergency, family emergency. That's the cost of doing business as a fan. You hope when you buy a ticket to an event in advance that event happens. There are scenarios. Where things happen out of your control. It's actually called force majeure. You couldn't have contemplated it, hurricane, whatever the case may be. Do you know why the concerts were canceled in Vienna? Because 2 men were arrested in an ISIS-connected terrorist plot where they had the means, the plan, and they were already cooking up the explosives to blow up the stadium. They had been radicalized. That is what's being reported. They're fully arrested, so we're going to find out. There will be evidence of the explosives they had in their homes. One of them was a 19-year-old who pledged his allegiance to ISIS, was living in Austria. It was discovered that the target of this terrorist attack was the very stadium where I was this past summer seeing Bruce Springsteen. Though I can't guarantee it was this past summer. I don't remember exactly when it was, but it was very recently, sometime in 2023. I was lucky enough to be able to go to Vienna, to go to Ernst Happel Stadium and see Bruce. Well, that's the same stadium that Taylor Swift was playing in. The government, working in conjunction with her promoters, made the decision that while this terrorist plot had been foiled, There was no way to guarantee that they were working alone. There was no way to firmly guarantee the safety of all in attendance, including Taylor Swift. And the decision was made to therefore cancel her 3 concerts. Although with the mute button, I don't have to say excuse me. The reason that I'd like to point this out to you today is that that's one of those things called self-inflicted. Remember we talk about the errors, the things that bother me in sports when something's self-inflicted? This wasn't because something happened to Taylor. This wasn't because of some national or international emergency. This is the world that we live in. And you may think that I am naive. You may think that I'm too political one way or the other, which you probably have no idea which way I lean. But is this what we want? And forget that they're ISIS. I don't care what they're in favor of or not in favor of, what they're fighting for, what they're not fighting for. This is the way that there are people who are being radicalized to think that they can effectuate the change that they want because of the what they suffer from, because of the indignities, because of the lack of money, the lack of attention, the lack of opportunity, the lack of food, the lack of the ability to practice religious freedom or any sort of freedom that you may or may not have or may or may not want. Here's how you're going to get it, because it's long established the terrorist attacks absolutely work. I'm still waiting for the newspaper article, the deep dive. Maybe that's what I want to find out one time. That it always works out for the terrorists when they do things like bomb or blow up buildings or people or stations and kill people, whether it's suicide or not. Oh, we made our goal. And they'll tell you the goal is to get to another place. That's what suicide bombers always say, where it's better. We're doing it for the good of the team. Wouldn't it be great if we could just interview one of them after the fact and say, is it better? Did it all work out the way you said it was going to work out? Because maybe the plan you had is not the perfect plan. Until we find a way to interview those people, I think they're still going to believe that, hey, could be better. Maybe not. I don't think it's better. I don't think it's better that we have to live in a world. It doesn't matter where you're from. It does not matter. Why should anyone live in a place or live in a world where there is someone who wants to do something for you? You're willing to pay for that, and you don't get the opportunity. It is the way the world should go round. I know how to do something you don't, but you love me for knowing how to do it so much so that you'll pay to watch it. You'll pay to watch me do something. Think about that transaction when you go to a game, when you go to a concert, when you buy a train ticket or a plane ticket, or when you buy a quart of milk. It's like a contract you have that you love something that someone else does so much so that you're willing to pay for it. I love that someone takes the time to make black jelly beans. You're damn right I'll pay $7.99 a pound because I don't know how to make them and I love to eat them. Bruce, thank you for working out into your 70s. Whatever it is you do to your body, your choice, your body. But I love you for performing for 3 hours and 5 minutes, so much so that I'll pay for it. I don't want anyone getting in the way of that. It totally violates live and let live. I'm sorry. Big day in the Olympics today. Big weekend. The men are either going to win or not win the gold. Spoiler alert, I think they're going to win. It's going to happen. We've got the women who are going to win the gold. Spoiler alert, that's going to happen. We've got Noah Lyles, who has a chance to win the double. Spoiler alert, that's going to happen. The USA has done a great job winning medals. For all of the people, whether you're on the Levitard show or anywhere else, talking about, oh, it's about gold, not about medal count. Silvers shouldn't count. There shouldn't bronze. What are you getting rewarded for? Let me tell you something. Any medal is CAS. Cool as beep. I think it's amazing the USA is leading the medal count. I think it's cool. I think that these athletes who are being rewarded, it's outstanding. Some of them are complaining about food, about cardboard beds, about traffic. All I know is that I'm watching the Olympics. I'm loving everything. A shout out to NBC, to Peacock, to Mike Tirico, the Sleepless Wonder, my brother, who can be out there doing prime time everywhere. To everyone from the candy guy to the traffic police in Paris to people who have spent years preparing, whether you like the food or don't like the food, it doesn't matter. You're putting on a show. And I'm happy to pay Peacock and happy to pay anything to be able to watch it, engage with it, and enjoy it. Remember, tomorrow, mailbag. Samson sit-downs next week and another mailbag. We will be back live on Monday the 19th. Thank you. It's just business. This is nothing personal.